My daughter-in-law locked me in the basement on my birthday, but I got my revenge and the lock clicked shut behind me, and in that single second, something inside Brian snapped. For 47 years, Brian had accepted the small indignities, the eye rolls, the whispered comments about his jokes, the way his daughter-in-law Linda always seemed to find reasons to minimize him. But locking him in the basement, on his birthday, while his own son stood upstairs and did nothing, that was the moment everything changed. He'd come home from work excited. Karen, his wife, had mentioned something special planned for the evening. His son Marcus had called earlier, saying Linda wanted to host dinner at their place, a gesture that seemed, for once, genuinely thoughtful. Brian had showered, put on his good polo shirt, the navy one that Karen said made him look distinguished, and drove over with a rare sense of optimism. The evening started normally enough. They'd ordered catering, expensive stuff from that Italian place downtown that Brian secretly thought was overpriced. Linda greeted him at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the same fake smile she'd perfected over the 9 years of being married to Marcus. She'd asked him to help carry something from the basement, some storage boxes she wanted to reorganize. "Sure, sweetheart," Brian had said, always eager to be helpful. To prove he was a good father-in-law, he'd gone down the wooden stairs into the finished basement, where Marcus had set up his home gym. The air smelled like old leather and industrial cleaner. Brian was examining one of the boxes when he heard her footsteps on the stairs. Then the sound, a solid, deliberate lock. For a moment, Brian had just stood there, waiting for the punchline. This had to be some kind of joke. Some strange, incomprehensible birthday prank that he didn't understand. He'd waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Eventually, he'd climbed the stairs and tried the door. Locked from the outside. "Marcus," he'd called out, keeping his voice level, reasonable. "Marcus, buddy, the door's stuck." He could hear them up there. Muffled voices. His son's voice, apologetic even from downstairs. Linda's voice, sharper, more commanding. "Let him cool off down there," she'd said loudly enough for him to hear. "He's always inserting himself into everything. Maybe he needs to think about his behavior." What behavior? Brian had done nothing but try to be part of the family. That was when the snap happened. That moment of crystalline clarity where Brian realized that 9 years of accommodations, of trying to be the cool dad, of biting his tongue and accepting criticism, none of it had bought him anything. Linda would never respect him. And Marcus, his only son, had chosen her over him. Brian looked around the basement. That's when he saw it, the ring box, partially hidden behind Marcus's weight rack. He shouldn't have looked. He knew that. But something in him had changed by then, something that said all the old rules no longer applied. He picked it up. Inside was a 2-carat diamond engagement ring. Not for Linda. Linda already had an engagement ring. This was new, fresh, recent purchase, based on the jeweler's receipt still in the box. Marcus was going to propose to someone else, and he was keeping it in his gym, hidden from his wife. Brian sat down on one of the workout benches and truly considered his options for the first time in years. He could bang on the door, demand to be let out. He could tell Marcus he'd found the ring and watch everything explode in real time. He could call Karen to come pick him up and cry about his humiliation. Or he could be strategic. Brian had spent 47 years being the nice guy, the accommodating guy, the guy who went along to get along. It had earned him a locked basement on his birthday. So he took out his phone, pulled up his banking app, and started making calls. By the time Marcus finally came downstairs 30 minutes later, looking sheepish and apologetic, Brian had already set things in motion. "Dad, I am so sorry," Marcus said, his face red. "That was Linda's idea. She said you were getting in the way, and she wanted to teach you a lesson about boundaries." Brian looked at his son, really looked at him. This man who had his eyes but not his backbone. This man who had married someone toxic and was apparently too weak to stand up to her. This man who was about to blow up his marriage and his life because he lacked the character to simply have a conversation. "It's fine, buddy," Brian said calmly. "Just unlock the door and let's forget it ever happened." But as Marcus reached for the lock, Brian continued, "You know what? On second thought, I think I'll stay down here for a while. Need some time to think. Don't let me interrupt your evening. Confusion rippled across Marcus's face. Dad, are you sure? Absolutely sure. After Marcus left, Brian made 3 more phone calls. The first was to his accountant, who was thrilled to hear from him on a weekend. Brian had been financially supporting Marcus since his college days, covering his deposits, helping with his car payment when things got tight, bankrolling the down payment on his house. With a few simple transfers and account adjustments, Brian moved his assets into an account that Marcus could no longer access. The second call was to his lawyer, requesting an emergency appointment Monday morning regarding his will. He had been planning to leave everything to Marcus, the house, the investment portfolio, all of it. There were going to be some changes. The third call was to a private investigator. Brian had suddenly become very interested in knowing everything about Marcus's affair. Names, dates, locations, evidence. The real kind of evidence that would be admissible in a divorce proceeding. He spent the rest of his birthday in that basement, sitting on a bench, laptop balanced on his knees, orchestrating the careful dismantling of the situation that had gotten him to this point. When Karen arrived, Marcus finally broke down and called her. Panicked, Brian emerged from the basement calm and serene. He looked so peaceful that Karen's anger at Linda immediately softened into concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, holding his face in her hands. "I'm fine," Brian said, and he meant it. "Actually, I've never felt clearer." The weeks that followed were a masterclass in consequences. The private investigator delivered his report within 10 days. Marcus's affair, a 2-year entanglement with his work colleague, was thoroughly documented. The evidence went to Brian's lawyer, who gently explained to Marcus that his father was prepared to finance Linda's legal team in the divorce proceedings. Linda, suddenly facing the reality of losing everything to a woman who had younger, more viable years ahead of her, became frantic. She tried to apologize to Brian. She begged to rehash the basement incident, insisting it was all just a joke that had gone wrong. But Brian, with a pleasantness that bordered on creepy, explained that the lock-in had clarified some things for him. He was choosing a different kind of life, one where his generosity had value because people appreciated it, not because they took it for granted. Marcus lost the house, half the investments, and custody of their 3-year-old daughter on alternating weeks. He spent $50,000 on his own legal fees. The new girlfriend disappeared within 3 months of the divorce becoming public. As for Brian, he took his wife to Europe. They spent 6 weeks exploring France and Italy, the trip they'd always talked about but never taken because there was always something to do for Marcus, some way to show up and help. He started volunteering at the community center, teaching financial literacy to young people. Real teaching, real mentoring, for people who actually wanted to learn. Most importantly, he rediscovered himself. The part of Brian that existed before he became so focused on being a good father that he forgot to be a good husband to Karen, a good friend to himself. A year later, his granddaughter asked why she couldn't see her dad on her birthday week. Brian scooped her up, kissed her head, and said, "We'll talk to your mom about that, sweetie." He didn't intercede. He didn't smooth things over. He simply let people face the natural consequences of their choices. Marcus eventually tried to reconcile, but Brian wasn't angry anymore. That anger had been transformed into something cleaner, a simple understanding that he had taught people how to treat him by accepting poor treatment for too long. "I love you," Brian told his son, "but I'm not available to fix your life. Build your own one. Learn from it. Maybe then you'll be the man your daughter deserves." The basement birthday became known in family lore as the day everything changed. But what no one outside the immediate situation understood was that Brian hadn't gotten his revenge through calculated destruction. He'd gotten it by simply choosing to live his own life instead. And somehow, that turned out to be the most powerful thing he could have done. The real power isn't in the elaborate payback. It's in the moment when you realize you deserve better and finally demand it.